The Death Mage Who Doesn't Want a Fourth Time. Chapter 4. Love for the Sun. The goblin collapsed as its skull was caved in with a dull noise. Are goblins the only enemies that are going to come out? The high priest of Alda, the god of law and fate, hurled abuse at the goblins as he beat them to death with his favorite mace. High Priest Gordon, is it not likely that the Dhampir either escaped with his vampire father or was buried alive when that cave collapsed? So said one of the holy knights under his command, but Gordon was not satisfied. Bowman Gordon was originally a commoner, but he was now a great man who climbed to the position of high priest by his 30s, using his faith, physical strength, and his magic of the life and light attributes. Now he had a burning obsession with exterminating vampires, lamias, scalias, and the other monsters that Vita had given birth to. Alda, the god of law and fate, is the only one with authority in the world of Lambda, and he has determined that the mere existence of these creatures is evil. It is our duty, as his followers, to destroy them. Like the other zealous followers of Alda, Gordon earnestly believed this with no doubts. He felt no shame in having killed the Dark Elf, or in his current task of hunting down her Dhampir son. He was proud, believing that his actions were those of justice. For that reason, he had been conducting a very thorough search of this small forest to find the Dhampir, but the search had run into problems. Unable to contact the hunters who had sold out the Dark Elf to lead them through the forest, he had hired other hunters and joined forces with the feudal lord's knights. But they had only encountered wild animals like wolves, bears, and boars, and the occasional weak monsters like goblins that came out to attack them. 5 days after they began their search, they discovered a cave that someone appeared to have been living in that collapsed, but they hadn't been able to find the Dhampir's corpse. Gordon had thought to dig out the whole cave, but had no choice but to give up on the idea because of the risk of it collapsing on top of them. If they had a construction specialist or a dwarf miner at hand, it would have been a different story, but there was no demand for a construction specialist in this area right now, so they were unable to hire such a person. The reason they continued searching the forest for 2 more months despite this was that the hunter that sold out the Dark Elf and 2 of his friends had simply gone missing after setting out to hunt the Dhampir. 3 hunters who were all familiar with the geography of this area had all gone missing. On top of that, their corpses still had not been found. Gordon's intuition told him that this was not the result of some coincidence or unfortunate accident, but something that had taken revenge on them. The Dhampir in question is apparently still a baby, but it's not out of the question. There was a reported incident in the past where a 3-year-old Dhampir slaughtered a party of D-rank adventurers. Giving up here would mean allowing evil to take root and grow in the future. He had to hunt the Dhampir down and turn him into ash. High Priest Gordon, it is impossible for us to make our search of the forest any more detailed than we already have done. Baronet Bostero has withdrawn his knights already as well. However, not everyone shared Gordon's zeal or saw the impending threat that he did. The feudal lord, Baronet Bostero, had dispatched 5 knights and half of his soldiers to help with the search, but now he grimly refused to offer any help at all. He could not allow the soldiers and knights that were needed to uphold public order to spend too long searching the forest. In fact, he criticized the continuation of the search, asking, "Is there no other work that the high priest could be doing for the people?" I know that the inhabitants of Evbegia have expressed their discontent. This forest was an important source of resources for the people of Evbegia, and the high priest had told them, "You cannot enter the forest while we are searching for the Dhampir, as it is too dangerous." It was only natural that the people of Evbegia were unhappy about being unable to enter the forest for 2 whole months. No, it is not only the people. The adventurers are not happy either. Well, they are F rank and E rank adventurers of no importance. They are taking their complaints to the guild, saying that they are having their work taken away from them. The monsters, such as the goblins that the adventurers received payments to exterminate, had heavily decreased in population during Gordon's search of the forest. Of course, this resulted in a sharp drop in the income of those adventurers. In addition, Evbegia was a central point of commerce between villages and towns, and so there were many merchants and wealthy travelers requesting escorts. But as the adventurers accepted those requests, there were less adventurers operating inside Evbegia itself. Naturally, the Adventurers Guild was not pleased by this. Baronet Bestero did not approve of the number of adventurers decreasing either. High Priest Gordon and his men were keeping the population of goblins in check for now, but they were not permanent residents of this town. After they left, he had no way of knowing if enough adventurers would return to control the population of goblins who reproduced very quickly. "What are you saying we should do? Surely you're not going to suggest we spare the goblins that come and attack us?" "Like I said, is it perhaps time to give up? My words are not those of the feudal lord, but there are plenty of other places that could benefit from our presence." In reality, while they were spending their time here, the vampires were moving in the shadows. Other monsters of Vida were also causing harm to the people. Was it acceptable to continue spending time searching for this Dhampir with no leads to follow? "We have no choice. We will leave Evbegia the day after tomorrow." The red evening sun shone on Gordon's bitter face. He had a strong feeling that the Dhampir would be laughing at them in the nights to come. That Dhampir, Vandaloo, spent the afternoon that High Priest Gordon left, sunbathing to his heart's content. "Sunlight, love you." He proclaimed his love for the sunlight. He had recently become able to speak, though it was not completely coherent yet. Living for that long underground had been harsh on him. He had thought it would be for 1 month at most, but Gordon and his men persisted for 2 whole months, and Vandaloo spent all that time living in the dark, surrounded by earth and rocks. He had his death attribute magic to prolong the lives of the 2 hunters, but they only lasted about half a month. After that, he had Bone Monkey and the other undead crush wheat grains and dried meat that Darcia had left behind, and soak it with water to make baby food for him to stave off his hunger with. When he could no longer stand that, he desperately looked for insects in the dirt to eat. His search led to the discovery of a stream of underground water. He had thought the cave would flood and he would drown, but it ended up being a fortunate event. His water supply had fallen low, and the discovery of this underground water had allowed him to clean his diapers. Up until then, he had made a golem out of the earth to change shape and dig a hole, drop in the used diapers, and bury them. Having run out of the ones that Darcia had made before, he was forced to use diapers made from the clothes taken from the dead hunters, and then even those were running out. He could use death attribute magic to sterilize himself, but he couldn't stand having soiled himself. As a person, that was not acceptable. Having been living on earthworms and sap from the tree roots for the past few days, thanks to a new skill he had learned, Danger Sense Death, he could find the ones that weren't fatally poisonous, but after he consumed them, for some reason, his status effect resistance skills level increased. There was likely something in the food he ate that was poisonous, though not enough to kill him. I don't ever want to have to live a life where I can consider catching a mole to be a miracle ever again. He firmly told himself that. Vandaloo, being a Dhampir, could see in the dark just as well as he could in the middle of the day, but that didn't mean that he didn't need sunlight. After all, he was half dark elf. He had been worried that he was going to die of vitamin deficiency-related diseases. High Priest Gordon, adventurers of the Five-Colored Blades party, please be well. Vandaloo earnestly prayed for the well-being of the High Priest Gordon and his men, who had left Evbegia and Baronet Bastero today, and the Five-Colored Blades that had left 2 months ago. Please, don't die until I've killed you. He earnestly prayed for them to not be killed by someone else, or die by accident or illness. The limit for a human being to be in the dark is around 90 hours. If you're trapped in darkness for that long, apparently it causes some mental problems, but I seem to have endured it surprisingly well. His sunbathing had calmed him down. Relieved that his mental condition had not changed over the past 2 months, he had the undead set traps to catch rabbits and other small animals. When he checked his status, a skill with an ominous-sounding name called Mental Corruption had been upgraded all the way to level 10. Was this because he had sworn to take revenge? Well, it also seemed to serve as a mental stability skill, so he didn't think much of it. As for his Death Attribute Charm skill, he thought it was a skill that he had used in Origin. There were several occasions when the elderly researchers in Origin that had treated him as a guinea pig died of strokes, became spirits, and then completely changed their personalities and apologized to him in tears. He hadn't thought badly of them for it. If it weren't for his conversations with the spirits in Origin, his mind would have crumbled long before his body died. However, when Orby and his companions had approached him as spirits after they died, he had felt only disgust for them. Vandaloo did not want to let them pass on peacefully, so he had forced them to inhabit a stone pillar that was supporting the cave, and they were still there now. For now, I guess I have to stay quiet and hidden until I grow a bit bigger. Over the last 2 months, Vandaloo had grown teeth other than his fangs. He was now able to walk, though with poor balance due to the relatively large size of his head. But he still needed to sleep for long hours and wasn't able to run. He was capable of an unsteady waddle, so even if he spent a whole day walking, he wouldn't cover much distance. If he wanted to leave this place, he still needed more time to either grow up or make preparations. Because of that, he had to postpone his revenge on Baronet Bastero, his knights, and the people of Evbegia. He had already thought of how he was going to do it, and had the confidence that he could pull it off, so he was feeling impatient, but it was something that he had to endure. It's already winter, huh? Now that I think about it, I still haven't asked Mom about this world's history. But before that, can I catch some prey whose blood I can drink? Though he had finally come outside, it seemed that he would die of starvation in the cold of winter. Vandaloo let out a sigh at the harshness of this world. In Lambda, vampires were divided into 4 different categories. First, there was the vampire born between Vida and the undead hero Zekart, who had long since perished and had his name forgotten, the true ancestor. The ones who had directly received blessings from the true ancestor, or those who were his direct descendants, were known as purebreeds. Those descended from the purebreeds with vampire blood that had thinned over the generations were known as the nobleborn. And finally, those given blood by the purebreeds and nobleborn and taken in as servants did not inherit the vampire's magical abilities, such as their charming gaze. They only inherited their physical abilities, such as their superhuman strength and regenerative capabilities. They were known as the subordinates. Generally, the closer a vampire was related to the true ancestor, the stronger their powers were. But vampires had considerable individual differences, so some subordinates, who were even more powerful than noble-born vampires, also existed. The common features among all vampires were their weakness to sunlight and the anti-undead life attribute magic taught among the followers of Alda. The other feature was the need to drink blood to sustain themselves. Vandalu's father was a pure breed's subordinate. He wasn't even one of the exceptional ones that were stronger than the noble-born. He was simply a normal human who had been turned into a subordinate. His name was Valen. He had originally been a thug living in the slums. The only thing that was not ordinary about Valen was his resistance against the sun. He had been even more resistant to the sun than most humans, so his purebreed master valued him highly. He had ordered Valen to carry out various tasks and gather information among the people. That was when he had met Darcia. Just like in the old love stories, the two of them had fallen in love at first sight. However, in the modern age, vampires were also divided into two factions. There were the conservatives, who continued to believe in Vida, who had been defeated by Alda, and the extremists, who had converted to follow the evil gods. The latter overwhelmingly outnumbered the former. If Valen's master had belonged to the conservatives, there wouldn't have been any problems with the love between him and Darcia. But as an extremist, he was strongly opposed to the dilution of the vampire blood with that of other races, even if that race was another race created by Vida. Making use of his special trait that allowed him to use his powers even during the day, he eloped with the pregnant Darcia. But in the end, he fought with his pursuers to protect his unborn son. And so Darcia, who managed to escape to this forest, gave her son half of her father's name and half of her own name. So, that's why I'm named Vandalu. That's right. Do you like it? Yes, I like it. It's a very good name. Vandalu, who for the first time in a while was able to eat something other than insects and tree root sap, listened to her story about his father that she had already told him dozens of times. That's good. I'm sure your father would be happy too. We'd agreed that we'd named you Vandalu if you were a boy and Varcia if you were a girl. So where was I? Yes, I was telling you about the vampires. With a smile, Darcia began to repeat the story that she had just finished telling. Her memory was prone to quick failure. After the death of her body, her spirit was deteriorating as it spent time in this world. There were cases when spirits would retain their personalities, even after 100 years if they were tenacious or harbored strong hatred and strength of will. But she felt regrets about the fact that she had been reunited with Vandalu as she was about to pass on. Even though she was inhabiting a piece of her own remains, her spirit could not recover. Even so, if I keep supplying her with mana, she'll last about 100 years. As he listened to Darcia talk, he decided to find a way to make her a new body within that time. Despite the few problems that she was having with her memory, Darcia could still clearly remember things from when she was alive, so she told Vandalu everything she knew. Lambda's time and calendar were about the same as Earth's, with a 24-hour day, 12 months of a 360-day year. The reason Japanese was spoken was because it has spread from the heroes who had spoken Japanese in their original birthplaces after they survived the battle with the Demon King. Currently, only common Japanese terms were used, and commoners could only read hiragana and katakana. The ability to read kanji was limited to nobles and merchants who had received a higher degree of education. Experience points were a quantification of the life's experiences that a person had been through. The people of Lambda increased their experience points little by little as they lived their lives. Of course, defeating monsters would grant experience points. However, the amount of experience points gained through certain experiences depended on one's job. Jobs were apparently the blessings of the gods that existed since before the Demon King appeared. The people were feeble when compared to the gods, so they were given jobs in the hopes that one day they would grow to be able to stand alongside the gods. Jobs determined attribute points and adjusted how their new skills were acquired. And if a job's level was raised to 100, one could change jobs. For example, if someone reached level 100 as an apprentice warrior, he could change jobs then to a warrior. As well as then with warriors and mages, there were farmers, craftsmen, and the like. People with jobs like warrior and mage would gain most experience from defeating monsters and enemies in battle, while farmers would gain experience most by doing everyday farm work or doing agricultural research, and craftsmen would do so by crafting things. Well, it would be strange for someone with a warrior's job to gain a lot of experience from doing farm work. It would also be strange for a craftsman's skill at crafting things to increase by defeating monsters. In other words, it was a system to encourage warriors to be warriors and farmers to be farmers. Everyone should work hard in their specialized fields. Incidentally, monsters had no jobs but had levels, apparently evolved or transformed into higher-ranked monsters upon reaching level 100. Therefore, it had been possible for Vandalu's father, Valen, to survive long enough and evolve from a subordinate to a higher-ranked monster. If he had managed to do so, he might have survived. Now I know just how bad the curses that Rodcart gave me are. The ones that prevent me from gaining existing jobs and gaining experience for myself. Cannot learn existing jobs. In other words, the curse prevented him from attaining a job whose existence was already known. So it was troublesome. If he didn't discover some new unknown job, he would be forever jobless. The curse that prevented him from gaining experience on his own was likely even more serious. While others could steadily increase their levels, no matter how hard Vandalu worked to train himself or study, he wouldn't gain even a single point of experience. 8 months have actually passed since I was born. I've gone through so much harder experiences than the typical infant. I've trained myself in magic, used it in practice, and finally even captured Orby and those other hunters, but I haven't leveled up. At this rate, he would reach adulthood and still be level 0. Being a Dhampir, his attribute points were high, but it would still be impossible for him to work as an adventurer or a soldier. With that said, it would also be difficult for him to work as an industrial worker, like a farmer or craftsman. With no job, he would not have any adjustments for how he would acquire new skills. In other words, he would have to work several times harder than regular craftsmen to compete with them. In addition, Vandalu was aware that he had poor communication skills. He had no talent for communicating with people. He had been born with anxiety problems. The more I think about it, the more I get the feeling that I've been cornered in this life. I'll stop thinking about it then. Let's go to sleep. They say that sleeping children grow up well. Vandalu had Bone Monkey put out the fire that he had started by making wood golems out of 2 pieces of firewood and having them rub against each other. Wrapped in furs, he went to sleep, leaving the other undead to watch over him. He drifted off to sleep, thinking that the lullaby that Darcia's spirit was singing to him sounded nice, but wishing he could feel her warmth. Incidentally, Darcia didn't know of any Dhampirs other than Vandalu, and Dhampirs themselves were very rare. Therefore, she didn't know anything about Dhampirs, and he had been unable to ask her about them.